Have you ever wondered which place on Earth gave birth to the strangest and most chilling punishments in human history? You don't have to look far a night. Let's wander together into the heart of ancient Rome, a place where every stone underfoot isn't just marked by the steps of emperors, but also hides chilling secrets about creative methods of torment that modern history wouldn't dare repeat. Welcome to a journey through punishments that will make you want to shudder and pull your blanket tighter. Punishments laced with dark humour theatre and just enough Roman flair to make the empire proud of its game, and future generations wonder, how did people ever come up with these things? But don't get spooked too soon, because behind every act of torture, Rome still resounds like music. There's the glow of ancient roads, the echoes from the Forum, and deep yawning shadows where forgotten stories lie hidden. If you're lying there now, surrounded by quiet darkness, your phone glowing soft blue switch off a few more lights, pull your blanket up, let your fan hum softly to set the mood, and get ready to hear stories not for the faint of heart. Tonight, we're not telling tales of Caesar or singing the praises of conquest. We're letting Rome tell its dark side, where justice was staged like theatre and fear was carved into legacy. If you find yourself dozing off halfway, just know maybe that's your subconscious protecting you from things so unbelievable they could only happen in ancient Rome. But if you're still awake, don't worry, somewhere out there, someone just like you is opening their mind to hear about a Rome that textbooks would never dare to reveal. In ancient Rome, the Vestal Virgins were basically the empire's national Wi-Fi. If they ever lost connection, the entire civilization could go into crisis. These girls were hand-picked before they even hit puberty, all to serve the goddess Vesta, the keeper of Rome's eternal flame. The job sounded simple. Keep the fire burning always, and just as importantly, stay away from men for 30 years. Breaking the vow of chastity in Rome wasn't just about embarrassing your parents, it was like detonating a nuclear bomb right in the Senate. If a Vestal was caught breaking the rules, her punishment wasn't expulsion, and it sure wasn't anything like today's cancel culture. No, it was being buried alive. Literally, a live hole with no room for excuses, no beating around the bush. They'd dig a pit, drop her in, cover it up. Why not use a sword like with every other crime? Because to the Romans, Vestal blood was taboo, even a single drop would offend the gods. So they came up with their own special route. Dig a really deep pit drop in a flickering oil lamp, a chunk of stale bread and a jug of water, because even in death you should stay hydrated. And so the poor girl would lie there in the darkness, with nothing left but time to reflect on her choices while the city of Rome dusted its hands off and went back to partying like nothing happened. Think the man who slept with her got the same fate? Nope. He'd just be dragged out to the square and whipped to death. Painful, sure, but at least it was quick. To be fair, becoming a Vestal was a massive honour. VIP seats at every arena, travelling by sparkling chariot, and just a word from you could save a condemned man's life. But all that glory came with one brutal catch slip up once and it was straight to the grave. And Rome took this rule so seriously it was almost obsessive. There was a famous Vestal named Cornelia sentenced under Emperor Domitian. Before her sentence, she still tried to protest. Does the emperor think I've slept with the gods because not a single man has dared touch me? A sharp retort, but useless. Only the darkness answered. So next time you feel overwhelmed at work, just remind yourself. At least your boss has never threatened to bury you alive in a hole with stale bread and a dusty oil lamp. Welcome to Rome, where HR policy was written in stone and in fear. And that's not even the end. Now let's talk about top-tier creativity when it came to crime, because if you were convicted of killing your father, you got a survival combo no one would ever want. Inside a cursed leather sack along with you, there would also be a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster maybe, so it could crow out the bad news in the morning. Once the bag was bulging with every kind of sin and animal instinct, they'd toss it straight into deep water, leaving behind a chaos of howling, screeching, barking, crowing, like someone had dropped a blender right into a nightmare. No one really knows why the Romans chose those 4 animals, but historians think each one had a special meaning. The dog represented the loyalty you betrayed. The monkey was the chaos you unleashed. The snake, a symbol of treachery and deceit. And the rooster, a final warning call now much too late. In other words, your sins were cast into the river along with Furfang's claws and the rawest instincts of desperation. Now picture yourself crammed into a leather sack with your new animal roommates. A grumpy-faced monkey who's decided it gets to be the boss. A snake coiling around your legs like it's inventing a new kind of yoga. A dog howling non-stop, claws tearing at the sack so hard it feels like the seams are about to burst, and a rooster utterly clueless about the time crowing at random, just like it's back at your grandma's house for Lunar New Year. The whole scene is like a nightmare version of an escape room built for anyone who wants the ultimate live or die challenge, and nobody's trying to win this one. If this sounds like a psychologist's worst nightmare, yeah, that's about right. Luckily for humanity, this punishment wasn't an everyday thing. It was only revived on rare occasions when a Roman emperor felt like turning the justice system into a reality show just to send a message. In Rome, killing your dad doesn't just get you killed, it makes sure nobody in the crowd sleeps well that night either. So if your dad ever forgets your birthday or tells a truly terrible joke, just be glad you weren't born in Rome, where a family crisis didn't mean going to therapy, it meant getting in a boat with a monkey, a snake, a dog, and a rooster. And speaking of crucifixion, most of us picture a cross, a long drawn-out agonizing death, a brutal reminder that going against the empire is basically picking your own grave. That was Rome's specialty, public executions part, warning part, entertainment since Netflix was a couple thousand years off. But you know how the Romans were, they could never leave well enough alone, so they invented a new twist, upside-down crucifixion. A normal death just wasn't humiliating enough. This was reserved for the ones they really wanted to make an example of hardcore criminals, rebels, or anyone so bold they wanted to die with a personal touch. The most famous was St. Peter, sentenced under Nero. He reportedly said, "Please crucify me upside down. I'm not worthy to die like my teacher." Rome was all for it. Why say no to a brand new spectacle? And then everything went from bad to disaster-level headstand from hell. Blood rushed to your head like you just downed an entire espresso in 3 minutes. Your muscles stretched in angles even a yoga instructor would respect. Every breath was a battle, pure inhale, drama, exhale, suffering. And the pain, not basic pain. This was next level from your toes to your upside-down scalp. Imagine sitting through a long, boring lecture, but you're hanging upside-down feet nailed to a board. Board doesn't even cut it anymore, you're so drained you can't even complain. But to Rome, this wasn't just about torture. It was a message, a symbol, the upside-down cross. Eventually it became a sign of humility and a lesson for everyone. Sometimes even death needs its own style. Unfortunately, these days that symbol's been hijacked by metal bands and horror movies, so now everyone thinks upside down just means creepy. But for the Romans, symbolism, philosophy, they couldn't care less. All they wanted was if you challenged the empire, Rome would give you a director's cut death, a performance no one would ever forget. So next time you see someone hanging out at a cafe, let's hope it's just a metaphor. Because in ancient Rome, hanging out could easily have meant a one-way ticket to the ultimate reality show where even your death had to follow the script. When you think of an inspiring speech, maybe you picture a coach yelling, "We win together, we lose together," but in ancient Rome, it was more like, "We march together," and "For every 10 of us, one's not making it home. Welcome to Decimation, the team-building exercise that HR would never ever put in the employee handbook. Here's how it worked." If your whole unit showed cowardice, betrayed each other, or just fell apart, the Roman commander would press the panic button on discipline. Everyone would line up and get split into groups of 10, then came the destiny lottery. Whoever drew the short straw, well, too bad for them. The other 9 had to beat them to death with sticks, rocks, or whatever they could get their hands on. Yes, not killed by the enemy, but by the same friends you shared drinks and the last piece of bread with just the night before. If this was on TV, it would blow Survivor out of the water. The only difference, no one gets voted off the island, and the winner is just the one still breathing now with lifelong emotional trauma included at no extra charge. Think those 9 survivors got a pep talk, a pay raise, maybe some benefits. Nope. Rome handed each of them a ration of barley instead of wheat, basically. "We're so disappointed in you. Here's your crappy granola bar." And it didn't stop there. They'd be forced to sleep outside the camp walls without any shelter. Rome's way of saying, next time think twice before running. The logic behind decimation was simple. When you fear your own squad more than the enemy, nobody tries to desert. And weirdly enough, it worked. Roman discipline was built on bones blood and the haunting look you gave your buddies every morning not knowing if you'd win the next death lottery. The most famous example, General Crassus Caesar and Pompey's rich and ruthless friend, after losing badly to Spartacus's slave army, he restructured his troops with a decimation. No memos, no HR meetings, just an instant brutal round of sudden death team building, and suddenly morale was up. In Rome, failure wasn't just a learning experience, it was Everyone got a share and nobody walked away clean. Some accessories from Roman times are the kind you only ever want to hear about. No one would volunteer to try them out. Picture this. Rome's collapsing shadows are creeping into every corner, and the church is getting pickier and pickier. Say the wrong thing about doctrine. Even just question a tiny piece of sacred truth. No one's inviting you for coffee and debate, you're getting the heretic's fork. Imagine a metal rod sharpened at both ends, one point digging into your throat from below the other, stabbing into your upper chest. It's like someone decided to turn you into a live kebab. Sound painful? Not yet. Once you're wearing this accessory, you have to stand perfectly still, nod off stabbed, yawn stabbed, whisper a stray thought. Congratulations, you've just stabbed yourself in the heart. It doesn't kill you right away, and that's the real cruelty. It's not about blood, but slow torture, draining your body, mind, and willpower like an iPhone on 1% battery after a long day. You have to stand there for hours, every muscle clenched just so you don't impale yourself. It's like playing the world's worst game of statues, except if you lose. The prize is a one-way ticket to the afterlife. The heretic's fork was pretty versatile too. Blasphemers, witches, liars, or anyone who just annoyed the local priest before breakfast all might win this prize. Some forks even had Latin phrases engraved, "I renounce my sins. I am guilty." Nothing makes you repent faster than slowly stabbing yourself in the neck. And this was just the starter kit for anyone who screwed up in Rome. No blood, no public execution, just silent agony and an internal crisis you could never scream about. If you've ever tried to hold back a sneeze in an important meeting, imagine that sensation lasting 3 days with 2 fork prongs ready to punish you if you move an inch. In Rome, silence wasn't golden. Silence was pain framed between 2 rusty prongs and a neckache sent straight from the gods. Now, if you betrayed Rome or just really ticked off the authorities, you'd be introduced to the Tarpeian Rock, a place where purges were done with style. Legend says the Sabines once promised Tarpeia a golden bracelet, but when the time came they gave her a group shield squash. Keeping their word Roman style, use whatever's handy. Her body was tossed off a cliff and that place was forever named Tarpeia's Rock, the perfect ending for traitors. From then on, the Tarpeian Rock became Rome's ultimate weapon for traitors, corrupt officials, false witnesses, or anyone who simply annoyed the state. No hanging, no sword. Just a quick flight and a hard landing, simple and efficient. The condemned were stripped, paraded through the streets for public ridicule, then led to the edge where gravity made the final judgment. There was always a crowd watching. Nothing spices up a market day like a good old drop-off. The Tarpeian Rock was right next to Jupiter's temple, so if you ever lied to the gods, or the government, your reward was a one-way ticket to a front-row view of heaven just for a few seconds. Even when Rome later came up with all sorts of gruesome executions, lions, crucifixion, fiery shirts, the Tarpeian Rock stayed a classic, timeless, classy, and sharp as a blade. Welcome to the Roman arena stone sweat and 50,000 screaming fans. This was ancient Rome's version of cable TV, and today's main event, Damnatio ad Bestias, or as we might call it, feeding people to the beasts for breakfast. This punishment, literally condemnation to the beast, was Rome's favourite for criminals, traitors, prisoners of war, and most tragically Christians who refused to worship the emperor. But make no mistake, it wasn't just about killing, it was a show. Rome didn't believe in boring executions, they believed in spectacle. The condemned were thrown into the arena where lions, leopards, bears, even elephants waited. But here's the twist. This is Rome, so sometimes the victims were costumed before they died. That's right, your death was directed like a tragic play. Some people were dressed as Orpheus playing their lyre only to be torn apart in the middle of their solo. Others played Prometheus and had their livers eaten by birds straight out of mythology. It was entertainment, justice, and religious propaganda all rolled into one hairy disaster. You might ask, did the accused get to defend themselves? Absolutely not. This wasn't a trial, this was a death sentence wrapped in applause. The crowd came for one thing, blood. And if the lions were sleepy that day, no problem. Romans had tricks, poke the beasts with hot irons, or just starve them for days just to be sure. Because one thing was certain, the show must go on. And don't think this was just for the worst of the worst. You could end up in the arena for theft, a bad political opinion, or just not following the right religion. The only thing between you and a lion's jaws, the mercy of a generous emperor. But don't get it twisted. This wasn't just mindless cruelty. It was carefully calculated. A bloody warning for everyone watching one false step and you could be the appetizer. Rome ruled through fear and hungry cats. Over time, Christian martyrs managed to flip the script, turning death by beast into a symbol of glory and faith. But for most people, damnatio ad bestias wasn't about glory, it was just guts, claws and screams. So the next time you complain about jury duty, just be glad you don't have to dress up as Orpheus and dodge leopards. In ancient Rome, getting a death sentence wasn't always as dramatic as being tossed to the beasts or off a cliff. Sometimes if you were lucky, or more accurately, if you had connections or noble blood, you'd get a special privilege ordered suicide. Sounds odd, right? We're not going to kill you, but we very sincerely suggest you do it yourself. How did it work if you were a senator noble or just had more than one nice toga, and you happened to anger the emperor whether you were plotting a coup or just walked too confidently down the street you'd get a courteous visit? A scroll would arrive, an oh-so-friendly message from the emperor. You have shamed the state. Please choose the honourable way out. In plain English, kill yourself before sunset. Otherwise we'll do it for you our way, and trust me, it won't be pretty. And if you obeyed, your family kept their property. Your name might even stay clean in the history books. Might being the operative word, don't bet on it. This was the Roman version of a severance package, except the paperwork was written in blood. And no, it wasn't considered shameful. On the contrary, it was seen as dignified. Plenty of elites saw it as their last chance to control their own ending. Some even wrote their farewells as one-man dramas. Just picture it. A warm bath. A small knife. And one final dramatic monologue. Classic Roman style. One of the most famous examples, the philosopher Seneca the Younger. Accused of conspiring against Nero, he got the order end it yourself. He slit his wrists, then his ankles, but the bleeding was too slow. So he drank poison no luck. Finally he climbed into a hot bath to speed things along. The whole thing wasn't so much a suicide as a sad little chemistry experiment. Ordered suicide was really just state-sanctioned brutality dressed up as honour-hiding absolute power. Rome let you think you chose your end, but in reality, you were erased quietly without trial or audience. Just the sound of water and the silence of complicity. So if you've ever thought your boss was passive-aggressive, imagine getting a royal memo one day, we're not going to kill you. But we do very politely suggest you do it yourself, nicely. And if you've ever complained about your stiff office chair, ancient Rome has a suggestion, one of their most creative punishments. A piece of furniture, introducing the infamous wooden horse. Honestly, it should have been called the agony pony. Spoiler, there's no horse. It's a tall, narrow A-shaped plank sharpened to a knife edge. The victim, usually a thief, a rebellious slave, or a misbehaving soldier, was made to straddle the pointy edge. That's right, your whole body weight pressing down right between your legs. But wait, it gets worse. To enhance the experience, they'd often tie rocks or heavy weights to your ankles. Gravity would do the rest. The longer you sat, the deeper the wood would slice through you. Slow. Painful. No knives needed. Depending on the mood of your executioner, you could be up there for hours. Rome didn't invent the wooden horse it may have started in the Middle East. But Rome, they turned it into an art form. Because if there's one thing Rome loved more than punishment, it was punishment with an audience. The wooden horse didn't always kill you. Sometimes it was just an excruciatingly persuasive public shaming. Imagine a crowded marketplace. Some shady merchant caught cheating customers now groaning on the wooden horse, while children giggle and street vendors hawk their snacks like nothing's happening. Pain theatre and a moral lesson all wrapped up in a position you'll never forget. Worse still, Roman commanders used it as military discipline. Disobedient soldier. Up you go. Nothing builds team spirit like a little internal bleeding. And yes, they sometimes got creative. Some wooden horses were metal, some had spikes, and one account even describes a heated version. Because Rome always listened to user feedback and kept improving their products. It was humiliating and brutal, turning something as harmless as sitting down into a once-in-a-lifetime experience literally. So next time your office chair feels a little stiff, just remember, at least it's not triangle-shaped. And nobody's tying rocks to your feet. In ancient Rome, it wasn't about your sitting posture. It was about the seat. In a world with no ID cards, no background checks, and definitely no Google, Rome had a simple way to keep track of criminals. They branded your crime right on your face. Not branding like a company logo, branding as in your forehead becomes a literal wanted sign. If you were a thief, a runaway slave, or a repeat offender, congratulations, you just got a new permanent feature. A burnt scar front and centre shouting to the world, "Don't trust this guy." How'd they do it? A metal rod carved with a letter heated red hot, then pressed straight into your forehead or cheek with all the gentle touch of a blacksmith on a tight deadline. Some common marks: F for fur Latin for thief, C for calumnious slanderer. Think of it like a 1-star Yelp review, but instead of showing up on the web, it's burned right onto your skull. And don't think this happened privately behind closed doors. Nope. Branding was a public event, a spectacle. The idea humiliate the criminal, teach everyone else a lesson, not just punishment but propaganda in burned flesh. Now imagine living your life with that scar on your face, grocery shopping. People steer clear, job applications, forget it, dating harder than conquering a kingdom. You're not a person anymore, you're a walking crime. Runaway slaves got special treatment in ancient Rome. They were often branded with the letters fig short for fugitivus, fugitive as a permanent badge of shame. And if despite the brand they dared to run again, the punishment got even worse, an unmistakable public warning. In Roman society, slaves weren't just property to buy or sell. They were forced to wear their crimes like a billboard in the marketplace. Some clever folks tried to hide the scar by cutting skin tattooing over it, or caking on makeup. But Rome never short on backup plans, passed laws making editing your crime logo a serious crime of its own. It was the ancient version of photoshopping your criminal record, and no one outsmarted the system. Later emperors like Constantine were kinder, suggesting the brand be moved from the face to the hand or foot, but the message never changed that shame was meant to be permanent, a mark that said this past will never sleep. So next time someone tells you, face the consequences, be grateful, it's only a metaphor. In ancient Rome, it wasn't just society that remembered your crime. Your face became the literal billboard for the whole world to remember for you, one scar at a time. In ancient Rome, free speech was a gift only for the acrobats, those who could flatter the emperor, argue philosophy, or recite love poetry. But if you blasphemed the gods, insulted the emperor, or even whispered something careless to the wrong big shot, the price wasn't just a cold stare, but a punishment so savage, so silencing it made everyone freeze, cutting out your tongue. The logic was simple. If your words were dangerous enough to shake the foundations of power, Rome had no problem erasing them forever. No anesthesia, no sterile surgery, just cold iron, red-hot steel, and pain like thunder. A soldier or executioner with zero hesitation would clamp your tongue, slice it off, or worse, rip it out by the roots. This wasn't surgery. It was censorship, certified by the state in blood. And don't think this was only for blasphemy. Sometimes all it took was saying something that annoyed someone powerful, a misplaced joke, a careless whisper, or a protest song, and snap, your voice was gone. What's truly terrifying wasn't just the brutality, but the spectacle of it. Public tongue cuttings declared coldly, "You can talk, but real power belongs to me." Even if you survived, you were left mute in pain, unable to explain, unable to scream, unable to utter a word in your own defense, the ultimate isolation. A wound not just on flesh, but written deep into your silence. Ironically, many early Christian martyrs wore that wound with pride. They refused to give up their faith, kept preaching. Rome couldn't kill the idea, so it tried to silence the messenger literally. But later Christians turned those mutilations into legends of courage, driving the Roman authorities crazy with frustration. If this all sounds too cruel, remember Rome was obsessed with control, and nothing controls a person better than cutting off their voice. So the next time someone tells you, "Watch your mouth, be grateful, it's just small talk," not a real Roman sentence to have your tongue cut out. If you think the Romans were running out of creative torture ideas, think again, they still had a true masterpiece up their sleeve. The torture wheel, better known to later generations as the breaking wheel, or for the drama lovers of the Middle Ages, the much fancier Catherine wheel. This wasn't just an execution, it was more like a living sculpture exhibit, with the main material being an actual person. First, the victim was tied spread-eagle to a giant wooden wheel, arms and legs stretched wide, imagine a starfish in a nightmare. The executioner, wielding a heavy iron bar, would begin his artistry. Blow after slow cold, deliberate blow, shattering joints, knees, wrists, one at a time. The goal wasn't a quick release, but to drag out every second, keeping the victim alive long enough to feel every wave of pain, every bone snapping, echoing in their head. That body with arms, twisted legs, broken ankles, bent beyond recognition, would start to fold and contort, turning into a grotesque living statue, a macabre blend of precision and brutality. But Rome's high art didn't stop there. Once the body was mangled enough, the pieces were sometimes threaded between the wheel's spokes, bent and woven, as if turning the person into a DIY project straight from hell. Sometimes the wheel was hoisted upright on a tall pole like a gruesome flag, or left gently spinning in the night breeze, casting a ghostly, terrifying presence over the square. In Rome, this wasn't just punishment. It was a public declaration. The breaking wheel was reserved for crimes that society utterly despised: murder, treason, highway robbery. Every turn, every crack of bone was a reminder. This is the price of crossing the line. This is Rome's blood-red boundary. Victims didn't just die. They rotted before the public eye, becoming a living lesson for anyone even thinking about stepping out of line. Survivors. Basically unheard of. And yet there was still a final twisted plot twist. If after a day or two the victim still hadn't died sometimes, the final mercy was a fatal blow to the chest or neck, but even that was maybe not a promise. As horrifying as it was, the torture wheel actually outlived the Roman Empire. Medieval Europe upgraded it to true artistry, adding spikes fire and ever more nightmarish death scenarios. Rome in the end just laid the groundwork, kicking off a bone sculpting festival that lasted centuries. So next time you think your morning commute is rough, just remember, at least you're not tied to a wheel, becoming the public's very own bone exhibit. In Rome, justice wasn't blind. It was loud, relentless, and impossible to forget. When it came to creative executions, ancient Rome always had another recipe. This time, let's welcome a punishment less famous than lions or crucifixion, but a strong contender for slowest, most psychologically terrifying death. Death by hot ash. No sword, no blood, no quick escape, just hot ash thick, suffocating and endless. This torture is linked to the imaginative mind of Emperor Nero, a man who saw executions as a kind of theatre. According to some records, Nero would have his enemies buried up to their necks in a pit. But that wasn't Roman enough. Instead of beheading or stoning, Nero added his own spice, a funnel in the victim's mouth with hot ash slowly poured in. Not boiling water, not fire, just ash. At first it sounds harmless. Ash is soft, right? But this was terror at its finest. The ash was extremely hot, it clogged the throat, burned the lungs, and slowly choked the victim from the inside. It didn't kill you instantly. It suffocated you. Slowly, relentlessly. You felt every second each breath is a burn. Each swallow brushes with death. When the ash finally settled, there was no blood, no external burns. But inside, everything was blocked, burned out, and dead. This was the death of eerie silence. Why ash? Because it was shame. It meant you weren't worthy. Ash is what's left after destruction, a waste to be swept away, the dust of things already burned. Dying by hot ash was a message. You're not worthy of a sword, not worthy of fire. You deserve to disappear quietly, choked by what's left behind. No honourable death, just a slow fade into someone else's leftovers. It's worth noting this punishment wasn't common. It was reserved for those Nero truly hated people he wanted to erase quietly, but still terrified down to their last breath. As for the crowds, no one really paid attention. No blood, no screams, just a person in a pit and grey ash trickling down. So next time you hear ashes to ashes, dust to dust, remember in Nero's Rome that wasn't just poetry. It was standard procedure. In ancient Rome, fashion didn't kill you unless you were unlucky enough to wear the tunica molesta, or as we should probably call it, the super flammable death suit. Picture it. You're marched into the arena or tied to a stake. Instead of chains, the executioner brings you a shirt. You think, well, at least I'll die dressed. But then you realise this shirt isn't just water resistant, it's dripping with resin pitch and oil. This is the tunica molesta, literally the annoying tunic, but it should really be called the nightmare jumpsuit. A shirt soaked in flammable goo fit tight, and then they light you up while you're still alive inside. This wasn't just an execution, it was a public show most infamous under emperors like Nero who turned death into after-dinner entertainment. Some accounts say that at Nero's notorious garden parties, people dressed in the tunica molesta were used to light up the gardens living torches for Rome's twisted idea of art. Who got to wear this? Arsonists, traitors, Christians, anyone the empire wanted to give the most memorable ending. The fire clung to your skin, your flesh melted, hair blazed, lungs burned out. You couldn't roll away, couldn't take the shirt off. The shirt burned with you until the very end. And Rome loved to mythologize everything. Sometimes they claimed inspiration from Hercules' poisoned robe, the shirt that sent the hero writhing in agony until death. Rome didn't just kill you, they made your death a kind of poetry. The height of Roman artistry was psychological warfare. You didn't just die, you were displayed screaming, thrashing in fire in front of thousands. The message couldn't be clearer, louder than any stone carving. This is the fate of anyone who stands against the Empire. Some records say music played during these burnings. Nero supposedly played his lyre while watching the flames. Literally the hottest show in Rome. So next time you complain about uncomfortable clothes, just remember, at least they're not soaked in oil and you're not the centerpiece of a public execution. In Rome, fashion wasn't just a statement. It screamed. Most Roman punishments, as brutal as they were, stopped at destroying your body, but some sentences were far crueler. They reached deep into memory legacy, even wiped out a person's very existence from history. That's damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory, a punishment so chilling, so final, that mere physical death feels merciful by comparison. Because what's scarier than dying? Only one thing. Being deliberately forgotten, erased by an entire empire that decides you never existed. If you were an emperor who disgraced Rome, a general who turned traitor, or a senator who fell far from power's favour, Rome didn't just execute you, they wiped every trace of you, leaving nothing for future generations to remember. Your statues would be smashed, or if they wanted to be subtle, the faces would be carved away until nobody recognised you. Your name would be chiselled off of monuments, every letter, every mark leaving only anonymous gaps in history. Portraits, if they survived, would be painted over, erasing every familiar feature. And your name, the one once stamped on documents, coins and memorials, would vanish from every record. If you ever accomplished something great, Rome would simply give your achievements to someone else. And if you had allies, they'd be forced into silence, erasing every connection to you. What chills everyone to the bone is just how effective this sentence was. People who were once the most powerful in the empire, whose names made all of Rome tremble, vanished so completely from human memory that even today we can't recall who they were because Rome erased them so thoroughly that even history had to give up in silent defeat. An entire dynasty, a whole golden age, disappearing into nothing, slipping into a black hole of history that nobody has the courage or even the reason to mention again. A haunting example is Emperor Geta Caracalla's unlucky younger brother, who was assassinated by his own sibling right in their mother's arms. Not only did Geta suffer a physical death, he was condemned to oblivion. Caracalla didn't stop at murder. He ordered every image of Geta removed from paintings, mosaics, busts, and had thousands of inscriptions chiselled out, every single letter of Geta's name scratched away, until only chilling scars remained. Some fragments still survive where Geta's blurry outline, a half-erased face, strange empty spaces among the other figures still lurk like a ghost in history. Proof of the moment when the past was caught in the act of being erased. But you know, damnatio memoriae was never just revenge, it was the ultimate act of control. Because if Rome could rewrite the past, it could shape the future any way it wanted. If a person could be erased as if they had never existed, then their ideas, their memories, even their dreams would quietly slip away too, like a pebble dropped into a lake, ripples fading, swallowed by silent stillness. That's the cold message the Empire sent to the world. You were never here. And if anyone dares to remember you're next, sounds like something out of today's world, doesn't it? When we talk about cancel culture, about reputations vanishing overnight on social media, remember the Romans were doing that 2,000 years ago. The only difference is they used chisels instead of keyboards and silent stones instead of angry comment threads. So as our journey through Rome's strangest punishments comes to an end, keep this final lesson with you, a small one, but enough to make you think. Sometimes the cruelest punishment isn't blazing fire or the claws of lions or ropes biting into flesh. It's the silence that covers over memory. Because in ancient Rome, what terrified people more than death itself wasn't physical pain. It was the feeling that you'd once lived, once loved, once dreamed, and then were forgotten as if you had never been here at all. So I wish you a deep night and peaceful sleep. And if you dream of ancient Rome tonight, just smile, because when you wake up in the morning, you'll still be whole and present in the memory of this world.